Welcome to the Roar for More podcast, where you build momentum and master how to roar with your authentic voice at work. So for my returning listeners, welcome to our newly rebranded podcast. We're evolving from Roar to Roar for More, and this is to reflect the next phase of our journey together. Note that, like roar, more is spelled MOAR exclamation mark. So once you've learned to roar, you are ready for more. And this is your guide to transforming work from something you survive into something that makes you come alive. Because here's what we know. You are meant for more, and you are already more than enough. When brilliant, capable professionals like you learn to truly roar, the magic happens. Whether you're navigating work challenges, leading through uncertainty, or ready to create cultures where people actually thrive, we'll take you on the hero's journey of workplace transformation. Because work isn't meant to deplete you, it's meant to fuel you. Your authentic voice is the foundation that makes meaningful impact and influence possible. Welcome to Roar for More, where we help you make work magic inside and out. I am your host, Marilise Basson, and today I'm delighted to welcome Lindsey Agness, the CEO and founder of Team NLP. NLP stands for Neuro Linguistic Programming. Welcome, Lindsay.
Hi, Marilise. So glad to be here. It's really exciting.
Very happy to have you here. And Lindsay and I have quite a long history together. We met as colleagues at PwC, and our paths crossed a few times since, and we've recently reconnected. And I was so delighted to hear what Lindsay's been up to, and to invite her to be a guest on my podcast. So I'm really honored and delighted that you're here, Lindsay. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Marilise.
So let me just tell you a little bit about Team NLP, Lindsay's organization. So they offer NLP training courses in London and Kent. The courses are designed by Lindsay herself, and she's one of the first female master trainers of NLP in the UK, and also the author of 4 best-selling books on organizational and personal change. Lindsay's book, Change Your Life with NLP, which we'll explore a little bit more today, was in the top 10 of all personal development books, just below Stephen Covey. And so she describes that as one of her proudest moments. So, Lindsay, I'd love to dive right into your mission, which is to help individuals, teams, and organizations to learn and have more choices and more success. Tell us a little bit more about the mission and about Lindsay and your why.
Yeah, thanks, Marilise. Where do I start? Well, really, over the last 20 years, I guess I've got more and more into becoming really curious about human behaviour and also behaviour at work, personal development. And so really, that's become the focus and attention of all of my work. And I like to call myself a change agent, and I see myself, and I guess my why is really helping individuals through to teams, through to CEOs, because I do a lot of executive coaching as well. Help people really show up in the best way, and that really aligns with your mission and your vision, and to really help people achieve their potential, and I guess help them understand how to do that, because it's very easy to say that, but to help them understand what might be holding them back, and how that's holding them back, and how they might want to do things differently, because the N in NLP is all around our our mindset and our
Yes.
thought process, and we have around about 60,000 thoughts a day, and for a lot of people, a lot of leaders, they can stop themselves from bringing the magic to the workplace and to their lives. So that's really something that has built my curiosity over the last 20 years. And so kind of all my studies and my focus has been in those areas. And it's been quite a ride, I have to say.
So beautiful. So beautiful. And yeah, I often talk about the mindset and the inner conversation. So roar is not just about courageous conversations with other people. I think it starts with the courageous conversation with yourself, and it's really about how do you reframe those negative thoughts, those limiting beliefs, those old stories that are not necessarily true. And so it's very beautiful that you kind of bring in the discipline of NLP, and I'd love to just hear from you in very simplistic terms. What does that mean? What is the discipline of NLP? What does that actually do, and help us understand it?
Yeah, thanks. Great question, Marilise. So really, I've heard NLP described as an instruction manual for the brain, and I think that's pretty cool. Actually, I think that's one of the best ones that I've ever heard. But if we kind of chunk it down a little bit more, so neuro is around the mind, and what we learn is what goes on in through our own thought process really drives what is possible for ourselves. So we can never achieve anything more than we believe is possible for ourselves. So the neuro part is really around what we think. And then the L is around language, another really important factor around achieving your potential, because it's not only around our body language and our physiology and how we show up, it's also, how we use language, that inner voice, and how we talk to ourselves. Do we describe our world as a world that's tough, and we're not good enough? Or is it a world, alternatively, that's full of possibilities, and we really encourage ourselves, to put ourselves out there? So, the language part is around what we say. And then I guess in some ways the most interesting part for me is the programming part, the P. It's a horrible word, really, but it's almost like our own computer software. So, how did we learn? What was the environment that we grew up in? Which country? Our families, our friends, and how have we been programmed in our own minds to believe what is possible and what isn't possible for ourselves? So, for example, I was brought up in a very kind of working class East End family where, I remember as a young woman, growing up and my family saying to me, well, of course, people like us don't go to university, and how we kind of absorb what's going on around us. And the battle I had, and I did go to university, but I went when I was 32, so once I'd got through that period where I began to believe that it was possible for me as well. So, it's really around what we think, what we say, and what we do, because essentially our programming leads to our behavior and ultimately, to the results that we get. So NLP, is a very powerful foundation for change. And you mentioned earlier that we met at PwC, and I actually took my first NLP course at PwC, and I was already a change manager. But when I took that course, it kind of unlocked a lot of the complexity around, why do people do what they do? And it really helped me, I think, become much more empathetic and help others, really understand what might make the difference, not only for themselves, but for the people that work for them in their teams. So that's a little bit of a long answer, but I hope that gives you a flavour of why, it really captured my imagination. And when I did my practitioner, I then wanted to do my master practitioner, become a trainer, and then become a master trainer of NLP. So I just kind of took it. I really wanted to learn everything there was to learn, and to take it through to the limit, really. And I've, it's really, I suppose, been the foundation for much of my work since 1997, dare I say it, when I did my NLP practitioner course.
Yeah, no, that's so beautiful. And I love how it's that thing that you find, like NLP in your case, but it's that thing that you find that, it just almost like feels familiar from the outset, and you just want to know more, and you're so curious about it, and really go deep. And I think for me, that's really following that intuition, that feeling, that knowing that this is the truth. This is your bigger purpose. This is what you want to do in your life. And then, as you say, going really deep, becoming a master practitioner in it. And I love that. Like 97, that's a long time to be so passionate about it. That's so beautiful. I love that. Okay, so I love the fact that it's neuro, that it's mind. What I do these days, especially in a work context, is to invite people into possibility, to invite them into feeling more. I love to see workplaces where we can bring the whole person, and the whole person doesn't feel like they've got to check their feelings at the door
Yeah.
when they walk into the office. So just help us really kind of understand also the connection. So we talk about NLP and we talk about the brain, we talk about the mind, but what about the heart?
One of the things that I think for everybody to understand is what makes them tick. We all have a different set of values, for what is important to us in our lives. And I think one of the things, as you said, Marilise, we almost kind of leave the F word, leave feelings, at the door. And sometimes I think that kind of goes for our values as well. And yet, if we really want to bring the magic at work, it's really important for us to understand what's important to us, and a lot of my work is helping people just kind of build their personal awareness, because a lot of this stuff, it's there, but it's pretty unconscious until, somebody gives you a key to unlock all of that kind of knowledge about yourself. And then, you can start noticing what's going on in your thought process, but also, when we talk about bringing ourselves, or kind of meeting our full potential, we're never going to do that unless we're doing work that is aligned to our personal values. And some of the work that I've done, particularly through coaching, has been helping people either understand, yes, they're in a great career that's aligned to their values, but sometimes they're not. And really, I was coaching a young man recently, and he was in a kind of high-powered legal. He was a solicitor, working all the hours God sends, and yet when we delved into what was really important to him, was being a yoga teacher, and that's quite an extreme. And so somebody like that is never really going to be happy, in a role that is not aligned. And yet for a lot of people, they are in, like for you, for me, we're doing jobs, it's not really a job, because I love to do it, and so it feels easy. And that's really, when you talk about bringing the magic, is I think that link, with NLP is helping people to understand what's really important for them, and helping leaders to understand that actually, if they're ever going to be a really empathetic leader, they need to understand the values of their team members, which doesn't mean to say they can accommodate those all of the time, but it does enable them to have a much better quality conversation with people, to help them begin to thrive in the workplace.
Absolutely. Gosh, there's so much I want to unpack right now. I think I would love to start with the sort of the leading self and the self-awareness piece, because I think the dilemma a lot of corporate professionals face is this kind of feeling that I've got to choose, like, your example of your coachee who is a, hotshot lawyer, but actually wants to be a yoga teacher, and how conflicting and confronting that conversation can be for someone who in a career, who is has got bills to pay, who has responsibilities at home to care for their families. So I think there's something about inviting people into possibility, and how do you actually navigate when you have such a contrasting, you do this one thing as a job which pays the bills, but deep down there must be more to this. You've got this sort of sense of, yes, I've achieved the title, I'm getting the paycheck, but then you kind of feel empty. Is what you're describing, is you don't have that alignment with your values, with your passion. What would you kind of advise someone like that?
Yeah, I think, you know what, there's always three choices. I think, it's a bit of a generalization, but on the whole, when people are in that situation, number one, they just carry on, and that's a choice. And sometimes they may feel, because of the financial side, they don't have a lot of choice, and I mean, I would always kind of challenge that, but that might be the reality, particularly if they're in a very well-paid role. It makes it harder to go off and do something different. So that's number one. Number two is that you kind of look to change some things, and sometimes that's possible. So around a job role, you might be able to introduce certain new aspects that are more aligned to who you are as a person, and you might be able to do that yourself, or you might be able to have conversations with your manager about those things. And I mean, I'm just making this up as I'm thinking about this coachee I had, but for example, somebody like that, perhaps he could run yoga sessions for his colleagues. That's just one example, but you make some changes around what it is that you do, but you don't kind of do that kind of wholesale change. Or of course, the third option is that you do go and do something completely different. And for some people, that is the right answer. For others, it's not. So I think it's about exploring within those three options, where is that person? Because obviously fear plays a part as well if they're thinking about making a big shift. And so sometimes, it's kind of going through those levels. So, you look to make some changes in the beginning and see if that's enough. Does that really fill them up then? Or, maybe they then have to explore later on doing something a bit more drastic, like for you and I, leaving a corporate role in our lives and then, going and becoming an entrepreneur. That's a pretty drastic change, which doesn't suit everybody. So I think it's not rushing into any of these things. I'm not the kind of person through with my NLP that says, no, just jump off the cliff, and hope for the best, because I think that can be a bit dangerous as well. It's about really, I think the first step is really helping somebody become much more aware of what it is that's really important to them. And for some people, they just know, and it could be a leader or somebody in a team, they just know that they're pretty miserable, but they don't know why, and then it's about helping them understand what's driving that feeling really, and what we can start to do about that. So does that answer the question, Marilise? I mean, that's how I would go about it.
100%. That's beautiful. You're making me think of a specific example I've recently discussed with a coachee as well. She's a contract worker, and she was so worried about, what if her contract's not renewed? And so we just made a little shift around also mindset and around reframing to say, you know what? You cannot put all your eggs in one basket. You've got to think about what other options do you have, and again, inviting her into that possibility to think beyond this one contract. And I think for me, what that speaks to, and something I've had to learn myself, is that it doesn't have to be this either or. You do this or you do this, but you can actually do both. You can kind of say, okay, instead of an either or mindset, you can do a both and, and that's why So I think so many people are these days sort of starting like a side hustle, so like dipping your toe in the water and just, giving yourself permission again, because I think as a youngster, I had this sort of sense of loyalty towards my employer, thinking, do you know what? I've got to give all my hours, that's available to this one company, and cannot kind of do something for myself. And that sense of loyalty, again, it comes from years and years and decades of conditioning growing up and hard work and et cetera, et cetera. Money doesn't grow on trees type of mentality. So it's really interesting how, you say that, we have choices. And I think, I've recently been challenged by someone who said, but what if the person doesn't feel like they have a choice?
Yeah, and that happens, quite a lot really, and not only around work, but sometimes it can be around relationships that somebody happens to find themselves in. And I
Yes,
guess, what I tend to do in that situation is, maybe it's quite a small shift, but it is just helping them understand that actually they're not in a prison. Everybody has a choice. You can make a choice to do nothing, a bit like that number one I was talking about. But
yes,
there's usually something that you can do differently, that starts you on that particular journey. And sometimes it can be just helping them understand and reframe what's going on inside their nervous system. I was talking earlier about, we have around about 60,000 thoughts a day, and we can never, that's if you like, what the total possibility, but we can only ever process and focus on a really small proportion of that. So sometimes it's around helping people notice, well, where's your focus? What is it that you're focused on? Are you focused on possibility, or are you focused on being stuck and having no choice? And actually, if you changed your focus a bit, maybe we can start considering some other options for you. And that can take time to do, but just to help people just explore through a different lens,
yes,
rather than, I can't do something, well, actually maybe it's possible, and that changes the whole emotional feeling around, what might happen next. But as I say, I would never want somebody to take enormous risks. I think sometimes, as I say, just pushing someone off the cliff is not a compassionate thing to do. I think it's really working with people at their own pace. Some people will just jump off the cliff, and they're great to work with as well. But in my experience, for most people, it's more of a journey, and it is helping them get there gradually, and really understanding this as the first step, really, because our thoughts drive how we feel. And first of all, understanding, well, actually I can start taking a bit more control over how I feel. It's not up to somebody else to drive my feelings. And then our feelings drive how we show up and our behaviors, and ultimately our results. So if we start to shift the thoughts even a little bit, it has a direct impact on our results at the end of the day. And that's, for me, was one of the really exciting things that I learned around, and NLP, was that actually I do have choices, and
yes,
I don't have to be stuck, and be in this conditioned environment that I've lived in, for all of my life up until now. So that has given me the courage to do things that I never would have believed I would write a book, or even start my own business. And yet I have, I have, because I really fundamentally believe now that I have choice in that matter. So I think everybody has choice.
love it.
So
Yeah,
yeah, but it can be difficult. Yeah, it's difficult for some people to take that on board initially. But yeah, we all have choices.
yeah, I agree. And I very much, in the third chapter of my new book, I say, own your choices. That's the
Yes.
title of the third
Ah,
book.
great. Yeah.
It is a very much a truth talking, it's like, it's probably a little bit of tough love conversation, but it is about owning your choices. And as you say, doing nothing is also a choice, even though sometimes it's subconscious choice. So I love what you say about focus, because I think Tony Robbins said, where focus goes, your energy flows. And I think that's the beauty of that sort of energetic vibe, that feeling you're describing, So if you really focus on the good stuff, you've got good positive vibes, versus, the glass half empty stuff, which gives you a really sort of heavy, contracted feelings. So the thoughts leading to feelings. And so, as you say, if we can just shift slightly what you focus on, already start raising, how you feel. You'll feel lighter, you'll feel better. And that, as you say, impacts how you ultimately show up. And that's also why I'm beginning to really talk to organizations about energy as a currency, in terms of, how we show up, and with energy, good vibes, with high vibes, it's really important, because leaders, and that's kind of where I want to go next, with the responsibility of leaders to create those environments for people to thrive. We've kind of looked at the leading self piece. Now, if we shift for a moment to leading others and leaders, what's particularly present with me right now is, where you have leaders that's been in business for decades, let's say 30 plus years, who are leading big organizations and who are a little bit stuck in their ways, especially in this age of era of uncertainty and AI. How do we influence, first of all, these leaders to recognize that they've also got to change?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, isn't it, really? I mean, I'll give you a little story of something that happened to me not so long ago, and it just struck me as something quite simple, and yet something very fundamental. So I was running a program for an organization, and it was, for leaders. And one of the activities, and I must admit, I've kind of thought about, should I include this? Because, surely everybody knows this. But it was about active listening, active listening. And we had this really, I mean, there were a lot of senior people in the room, but there was this particular, it was a guy who'd been in the role for, I don't know, probably 20 years, and had worked his way up. And we did this active listening process with him and the rest of his group. And he was very honest about it afterwards, actually. And he said, "You know what, Lindsay?" He said, "that has really fundamentally changed the way that I'm going to manage my people in future." Because he said, what I realised was, despite being in this job for such a long time, I've always just been on transmit, and when people are trying to talk to me, I'm just thinking about, what I want to reply, or my mind is off, thinking about something else. So he said, just to be in the moment with people and to listen to them and start to explore what's really important to those individuals. He said, I really believe that's going to transform my leadership style. So I thought that story just popped into my head then. And I think sometimes it can be small things that make a big difference. And, when we reviewed the program, because we did some coaching with people, over a period of time, and he was getting feedback from his staff that he had suddenly become much more empathetic. And it was just by him changing the way that he was present, and listening for people. Now, I know not all leaders would run with that, but that was somebody who at least was open to doing something different. And I guess something like that was pretty, I mean, it's going to use the word simple. It's not that simple, really, but it was something that he could kind of grasp, and think, yes, I'm going to take that away and run with it. And maybe that was a bit easier than starting on some of the kind of more complicated stuff. So I think it's finding a way in with these individuals and showing them that there is a different way, a better way, that, a relationship that's not just transactional. It's a relationship that is much more built on relationships and feelings. The F word, the dreaded F word. Understanding what people really really want.
I remember reading the foreword that you wrote for Colorful Boardrooms, and you actually talking about the zombies, when you get to work on the train and just people who are like zombies. It made me think of that. I love that you're sharing such practical advice, Lindsay. I always say that the little things are not the big things. The little things are everything, and the small changes. I honestly cannot agree with you more. The smallest of changes can create so much momentum, and that's really why. We really have to focus on tiny habits, doing small things differently. And that's, as you say, it sounds so simple, but it's not easy, because you have to practice. It has to become routine. It has to become a habit. It has to become your conditioning, before it can really become easy. And it's not dissimilar to, training in the gym and working out and building a muscle. It's really bloody sore in the beginning, and then later on you get stronger and it gets easier, and you can go heavier. I think it's the same concept, same principle.
And I think it also around with with leaders that have been maybe around and have got used to that kind of transactional approach. It is encouraging them to ask another question and another question. So you don't just leave it with, well, have you done this? Yes, okay, fine. It's around really understanding, well, how was that for you? Was it something that you felt you did a good job on? What did you learn from that experience? It's all about, as I say, building that relationship with your managers, and your team members, so they feel that they're being listened to, and they feel that if something's not quite right, then somebody is willing to help them and support them, make some changes. And for some, people in some roles, it is that number two option, making some small changes around the job purpose, job role. And you can find that somebody is 100% happier once that's done, because actually they're playing to their strengths. They're doing something that they're good at, rather than having to come into work every day and be miserable.
Exactly. I love that. And that's the other, there's so much we can unpack here, but the other theme that I love here is around strengths-based approach and kind of building on strengths. We are so much more able to get better at the things we already love and enjoy and we're good at, compared to focusing on, what we cannot do. And I think, we've grown up in corporate environments that was always so focused on development and what you've got to do differently and what you've got to do better. But I love how you position kind of, focusing and building on what's already working, what's good, and asking different questions. I think that's so important. Better questions, different questions, because that's going to lead to better quality answers as well. So, Lindsay, I want to just switch for a little moment, because I know that you're currently writing another book with your daughter. This is perhaps a little bit more personal, but I just love for you to share a little bit more about that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, and delighted to. And it is, it's a more kind of personal example. But I've been thinking about for a while, what is the next book? Because I haven't written a book for some years, actually. It's almost like I downloaded everything that I had in my head at the time. And so I was kind of waiting for something to present itself, I guess. And I have been supporting my daughter who has an eating disorder. She has anorexia, and that has given a kind of experience and flavour to life that is a bit of a roller coaster at times. And so one of the things that we've been working on is, how can I use my toolkit, to support her and help her understand some of those beliefs and behaviours that drive the disease, the illness. And so what we decided to do it was beginning of the year, and we set ourselves a challenge to jointly write a book. And this is a working title. We haven't got the final title yet, but it will be something like Beat Anorexia with NLP. And we decided to write the book with two voices. So there's my voice as the mum and the supporter, but not only that, the voice of the approach, and some lots and lots of ideas about what you can do in it as you go through the recovery journey. And then my daughter Sophie, very much giving her lived experience voice and being very honest and quite brutal at times, she's been so brave, actually, much braver than me. I've just had to write about, activities and approaches that I know can help. But she's really written about how she's felt as she's experimented with them. So, we've put this book together, and it's really for sufferers, people with an eating disorder, but also every chapter has got a piece for other carers and other professionals, because one of the things that I've learned over the last few years is that there's not a lot out there, really. There's not a lot of support. I mean, there is some stuff, but just kind of, you mentioned earlier, I'm very practical. So things that people can pick up, that are not written by a clinician, they're written by somebody that really understands, and things that they could use with their own loved ones. So we've got the first draft done, and we've got a plan to publish that later this year or early next year. So that's a very personal book, and again, if it just helps one family, then it will have been worth writing that book. But hopefully, it will help a lot more families than that.
I would agree with the fact that there's not an awful lot out there, and I love the fact that you're doing it from a parent's perspective. I remember as a 20-year-old going to rehab, also as treatment for my eating disorder.
Right. Wow.
I just remember my mum. I think, and I'm feeling emotional now, but I think it's that feeling of, what have I done wrong? What can I do to fix it? And I think just that acceptance and that realization that you cannot really fix anything, this is far more complex than you as a mother or as a father fixing it. So I, for one, cannot wait, because I don't think you ever truly overcome. You have to live with it for the rest of your life. It is, as you say, it is a voice that you've got to control in your mind constantly. And yes, it gets easier over the years, but there's always a niggling voice that, wants to convince you otherwise. And so,
and it always feels very fragile. You make me feel, because it's been a very emotional journey for me. And of course, with the work I do as well, it's kind of felt like, well, I must be able to fix this. How can I not fix this? And yet, one of the things that I write about in the book that really I've learned is that this is an illness, and it's a series of a combination of factors that come together in certain people that lead to this illness. It's nobody's fault, and as a parent or a carer, I think that's probably one of the most important things to learn. Otherwise, you just get stuck in guilt, and that's not really very helpful, for anybody. But yeah, it has been quite a journey, and just learning to kind of walk alongside Sophie rather than trying to lead or drive. It's really around pacing her, and pacing her recovery. And when I do that, I find I can help the most. So, that's one of the things we talk about in the book is how do you get somebody who's very resistant? Because often, in the beginning, these people, these sufferers, they don't really see that it's an issue. Other people around them can see it's becoming an issue, but they don't, and that can carry on for quite a long time. So just kind of understanding it's not just about, just bloody well eat something, which it's very complex, very complex.
It's
and
almost
so
this
just
it's that obsession to protect, because that's the one thing you can control, because the rest of your life feels out of control. But I love that you're walking alongside Sophie, and I'm wishing her and I'm wishing you all the
thanks,
best.
Marilise.
I think it's a really it's a sensitive topic, and as you say, it's not something anybody can fix. It is something that you can support, you can hold space. And I think one of the biggest gifts you probably are giving her is supporting her in sharing her story, because I know from personal experience, a lot of healing comes from sharing your story, whether it's writing it, whether it's verbally sharing it. And I think the healing that comes from that is going to really help shift her forwards and help her forwards as well.
Yeah, and that was one of the thoughts, really, was enabling her to have some kind of platform, even if nobody ever read it, at least she's been able to express her journey, and
Well,
and
my
for
mum
the
and
first
I were
time.
first to buy the book.
Yeah,
Very.
thank
Oh, Lindsay, thank you. Thank you so much. I mean, this is pure gold. I love that you've joined me today. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me. It's been wonderful to reconnect again.
Yes, and
And
I know you are not necessarily looking for a lot of work anymore, because I know that you are very, very much now beginning to I don't know if slow down is the right word. I don't know if you will ever slow down. Knowing you, but if someone would love to reach out, both on the kind of NLP in an organizational context, or on you and on Sophie's book, how do people reach you? What's the best way to reach you?
and we still are running all of our NLP courses, and I have a team of trainers that I kind of facilitate. So we still love to hear from anybody that's curious. So teamnlp.co.uk is our website, and we do have a free online intro to NLP that you can just download and watch the videos at your leisure. So if you're curious, that's a good place to start. And certainly, if anybody is curious about the work we're doing with eating disorders, then email me. You can email me either at info@teamnlp.co.uk, or Lindsay, which is Lindsey, at teamnlp.co.uk, and be delighted to hear from you.
We'll put all of those details in the show notes as well. Everybody, thank you for joining us today, and I hope you love the new look and feel and the sound of Raw for More. If you've loved today's conversation, hit subscribe so that you don't miss another episode. And if you have any thoughts, anything that you would like to share, feedback, just let us know, get in touch. But thank you very much once again, Lindsay, for joining me today, and take care, everyone. Until next time.
Yeah, bye-bye.